So today we're going to continue building on our Laravel application, and today we're going to learn how to set up routes for all the different methods that are inside our controller that we set up in like 2 episodes ago inside this course here. So we learned how to set up the model and the controller, and in the last video you then learned how to set up the database, at least when it came to the database table for our posting system. And today we're going to learn how to set up these routes that are going to actually make all of this make sense. Because right now we just have like different puzzle pieces, but none of them are actually like connected right now. So we have an actual system going. So just a quick recap. We have a model file inside our models folder, which is called post. Now this particular file, we did actually modify in the last episode to make sure that we could actually post certain information inside our table, inside the database, in order to not get an error message. We did also have if we were to go inside HTTP here, a post controller.php, and this one we're actually going to be talking about today, because right now inside this controller we have all the methods for essentially doing things with this particular posting system. So whenever we want to create a new post or delete a post or update a post or something, all of that is going to go inside this particular class. Now, right now, we don't actually have any code inside this class here besides the methods that we're going to use, which was automatically created for us by adding the resource R behind the command when we actually created the model and controller 2 episodes ago. So we have all these different methods, but nothing is actually going on inside of them. And that's something we're going to do today as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go inside our routes folder inside our website directory. So we were to go down inside routes, which I have down here at the bottom. Then we have something called web.php, which we have done quite a bit in the first many episodes of this course here. Now, right now, because this is a freshly installed Laravel project, I just have the default welcome. It basically just returns the front page when I visit, like just the name of my website without any // or anything behind it. So it just returns the front page. So now, in order to actually run all the different routes that are related to my post system, you might be thinking, well, okay, so we have to go down and we have to create a route, like a post route for the first method inside my post controller or something. But that's actually something that has been made much easier for us because it's built into Laravel just to automatically pull in all those different methods from inside our controller class. So the way we can do that is by first of all saying that we want to use a particular, if we were to go up here right below the first use we have inside as a default on a new installation, I can paste in this particular path here, which goes in and says we want to use our post controller file, which is inside our controllers folder, which is up here. Like that's the file that we just talked about that had all these resources created inside of them. So that's the first thing we need to include inside our routes file, which is called web.php. The second thing we need to include is to actually create all the different routes for that particular file here that we just included inside our routes file. And the way we do that is not by manually creating one route after another below here, but it's actually just to include this one line of code that we have access to because we include this particular file in here so we can use it. And we basically just say we want to create a route, and this one is actually based off a resource, which is something that Laravel understands. Oh, okay. So it's the built-in resource feature that we're using here, which basically means that it's going to create a route for all the different methods we have inside this particular post controller here. So basically this one line of code is creating a whole bunch of routes that we can use for this particular application on its own. Like we don't have to manually create anything here, which is kind of neat. So basically what we're saying is that if I visit this particular link inside the URL, so /posts in this case here, then we're going to be using all the different routes that are available to us inside the post controller class, which means all the different methods that we just created down here, which are part of the resource system that Laravel automatically created for us. So what I can do is, now that I actually inside my web.php included this route here, is I can actually go inside my website, and then inside the URL, I can say /posts. And if I do that, it is not going to give me a 404 page not found, because we now have a route created for this particular page. But it's now going to return the index page for the post routes, so to speak, like the main page for our posting system. And what is that particular page? Like, how do we know which page that is? Well, if I go back inside my post controller, you'll notice that the first method inside a post controller is called index. This is the method it calls whenever you load that particular URL inside your website. So just the name of your website /posts. Then it loads this particular method here. So right now, it's not actually returning any pages. Like, there's no pages being viewed inside this particular URL path inside our website. And that is actually something that we need to create inside this particular method here. So we need to tell it which page to return when we call upon this URL. And now the way we can do that is actually by using two simple lines of code, which looks like this. So now, what exactly does this code do? Because I need to explain this as simply as I can to make sure that everyone understands and don't have any, like, all sorts of questions. We're doing two separate things here. I could actually, just to make it easier to explain, delete this right here. Basically, we're returning a view called posts.index. Now in Laravel, this basically means that we have a posts folder, and inside that folder, using the dot here, we have a file called index.blade.php. That is what it's saying. So if I were to actually create that file, because right now we don't actually have it, if I were to go down inside where we have our view, so if I go inside resources, go into views, you can see that right now we don't have a post folder. And it's kind of a good idea to organize our project into, separate folders, to not just have all our PHP files in one place. So inside the views, I'm going to right click and say I want to create a new folder. This one is going to be called posts, because that's what I called it up here. And inside this folder, I'm going to create a new file called index.blade.php. And that is the file that we're linking to inside this particular view. Okay, so we're going inside the post folder and selecting the index file inside that folder. So what is this index file? Well, this is going to be the main page for when we create this posting system, where people can go into a page inside your website and see all the posts created. Like, that is what we're creating here, basically. Now, the second thing we're going to add in here is this last part that I deleted. Basically, in the first line of code, we're grabbing all the data from inside our database, and we're inserting that inside this variable here, which turns it into an array, basically, because we might have many different posts inside our table. So therefore, if you have multiple pieces of data inside a variable, then it becomes an array, right? So this is basically an array that has all the posts from inside the database. Now, I'll explain this line in just a second. But just know that with this array here, I then go down inside my view where I return the view, and I pass in a second parameter, which basically says if I want to pass some data with this view here. So when I load post.index, which we just created, then I'm also passing in an array. That is what compact means. We're passing in an array to this view called posts. Now, posts is what we have up here. So we're basically grabbing all the data from the database, or all the posts from inside our database table, passing that to this particular page here, so we can see it inside that page. Does that make sense? I think it does. So basically this code here, post : all parentheses, takes a little bit more explaining. So post is our post model, right? Because we actually link to it up here. And inside the post model, it says that we're using a static method called all. Now, if I go inside our post model, which we have up here because we created it 2 episodes ago, you'll notice that we don't actually have a all method. Like there is no like function, and then I say we have one called all, like this doesn't exist inside this particular class here. Now you can see it's actually giving me an error message because it does actually exist, but you just can't see it. Because remember that this post model extends another class called model. Now model, like I explained in the previous episode, is the core or like the furthest back model class that we have inside when it comes to using Laravel. And this particular model class that we're using up here and extending to does actually have a bunch of built-in methods, which includes one called all and one called find and one called create, update, and delete, which basically means that we can use this base model class here to do basic functions or like basic commands, so to speak, with our database. In this case, all fetches all the entries from inside a particular table. If I use the one called find, then I can pass in a parameter inside this find method and find a particular entry inside a table. For example, if I want to find a particular user to lock him inside our website, then we can do that. We do also have one called create that creates a new record inside our database. So we have a couple of different methods that are built inside the model class that we can use. And in order to use those methods inside the model class, we need to do it through using our post class down here, because that is one that we can use inside our project. Does that make sense? It's like we're using a method that is like a couple of classes back that we can't see, so to speak. So with that, let's actually go back inside our post controller. So basically we're saying that we have a post model that has a static method which it grabs from the models class, which is a step further back, that then goes in and grabs all the data from inside our particular database table called posts. So it passes that data inside our view, which we then can see inside our website. So if we were to go back inside my website here and refresh it, you can actually see mine like throws an error here, but that's just simply because I did not have this page created yet. But now we do have it created. So when I refresh it, you can see that it's giving me the same blank page, but this time it's actually returning a page from inside our website. So if I were to actually go back and open up my index.blade.php file and just say I want to create some default HTML5 setup, I could create a paragraph here and I could say all posts. If I were to save that, go back inside my website, you can see that now we get all posts because that is the page that is being returned to us. So I hope it makes sense because this is kind of like a spider web of information, like one file leads to another. But inside the post controller, basically all this is that we have a method called index that returns the front page for when you visit /posts inside the URL. And in this case, we're telling it to return the index page inside our post folder that is inside our views folder, right? Because these are all the files that we can actually see inside the website. So with that, we have a couple of other things we can actually create, because we do also need to be able to create new, new posts inside the website and so on. So what we can do here is inside the create method that is further below, I can paste in this line of code here. Basically, this is just going to return a view called create. And right now, we don't actually have that one created. And as you can see, it's actually saying that that particular file called create.blade.php is inside our post folder as well. So if we were to go inside my post folder, create a new file, I can say create.blade.php. And now we do actually have this file that we're linking to. So what exactly is create? That is basically just us saying that the page that we want to use in order to create a new post is going to be inside posts/create. So if we were to actually go back inside my website and say I want to go inside posts/create, then it's going to return that page. And this is where you would, create a title, create a message like a body for this particular post, and then click upload or whatever, to the database. So that's basically the page that we just created here. So we do also have one down here called store. And this one is actually for when we want to send this data to our database and submit it inside the database. And this is something we have actually talked about in a previous episode. If we were to actually paste in the code that I have here, just going to wrap it down so we have it on new lines. So basically this one goes in and says that, okay, when we submit this form that is going to upload a new post to our database, we're going to have a couple of different information inside this form. Now, the only two that we need to fill in is the title and the body that we actually told the database that we will fill in ourselves. Remember, the ID and the created at and updated at columns are automatically getting created, so we don't need to do anything there. But we do have two columns that we need to fill in. In this case, those are called title and body. And basically, I'm just saying that it needs to, like, those fields need to be filled in. Like, you can't just leave them empty and then submit them. Like, you need to fill them in. So as you can see, I added a required statement here, so to speak. So this is basically just going in and validating the form data that the user submits and says that they need to fill it in. And then it goes down and says that we, again, want to call upon the post model that we have up here. And then I want to run a create static method. And then I want to pass in a piece of data. And again, this is a method that exists not inside our post model, but inside the models class that we have inside our Laravel installation. Okay? Again, you can't see it, but I promise you it's there. So if you go back in here, basically we're just running this particular models method, and we're passing the data into it. And then we want to just simply return the user to a particular page with a success message if this is actually working. So if this is successfully created inside our database, then redirect the user to a new route, which is called post.index. And this one we have already created. So it's going to basically return the user to the page that has all the posts inside of them, which is our index.blade.php file inside a post folder. Okay? And then we just simply want to pass in a success message together with that particular page, which in this case is just post created successfully. In the next one down here, we're not going to do anything when it comes to our show. We're just going to leave that one empty for now. But when it comes to the edit, I would actually love for us to be able to edit our posts once we have already created them inside our database, because that's something we can do on Facebook. If you write a message on Facebook and then, oh, okay, you made a typo, you might want to change it, right? So what I'm going to do inside our edit here is I'm going to pass in 2 lines of code. So basically what we want to do here is we want to find a particular post inside our database, and then we want to edit it, right? So what we can do is we can say that we don't want to pass in this default resource code here, but instead we want to pass in an ID for a particular post. So when we use this method here, we pass in an ID, and then we use that ID in order to actually find the post that we want to grab from inside our database. In this case here, we're creating a variable, and we're setting it equal to a post static method, which is called find or fail. This is another method that is pre-built into the models class. So this is not one we need to create ourselves. This one just exists alongside the all method and the one we had up here called, where is it? Okay, well, we didn't use another one. So basically, this is the second one that you get to see. So this one is basically going to find a particular post from inside the post table with this particular ID, right? So we can then, if we find it, return a particular view and then pass in that data to that view. This line of code we've actually seen before. That is the exact same code we had up inside the index method, right? We're returning a view, and then we pass in an array of data to that particular view. So in this case here, we're finding a post with all its data, like, for example, the title and the body and created at and the ID and everything, and we're passing that into our post.edit file. Now, we don't have this file yet, so we do need to go inside our views folder, inside our post folder, right-click, new file, and say we want to call this one edit.blade.php. I promise all these pages down here will make sense later. Like right now, you're just thinking, well, when do we get to use these pages here? Well, it'll make sense in just a second, but for now, let's just go ahead and create these methods here, and then I'll show you how they're all connected. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that if we find a particular post that we want to do something to, then we can actually edit it and update the information inside the database. And we're actually going to go down here and use the update method that we have inside our resources here. Now, this one is kind of similar to what we have done before inside this particular one up here, where we actually create a new post. So if we were to go down and paste in the code that I have here, so we want to validate the data that we edited inside the form inside the website, because remember, you have to change the title and the body, and then you have to click update. So you're basically sending some new data to our database that it needs to update the table with, right? So that is basically what we grab here and validate. And again, we want to say it's required, like you don't want to leave any of these empty. Then below here, we're basically saying we want to create a variable that is equal to the data that we find based on this ID here, which again, we've done before. If you go up to the previous one called edit, this is basically a way for us to find that particular post. And once we find the post, we can then go in and say that we want to edit it or update it with the new information. So basically, we're grabbing this variable up here, and we want to say that we want to point to a method called update. And inside this update, we just basically pass in the validated data that we want to update it with. Now, what is this update? Well, that again is inside not the post model, but inside the models class that we cannot see. Well, we can see it if we dig into it, but right now we have not created that file. Like, it's just a default file that is part of the Laravel project, right? And just like we have access to the all method and the create method and find method, you know, like we also have access to one which is basically called update, that goes in and updates something inside the database. Again, a lot of this is going to be a little bit confusing because you're thinking, well, like it's just automatically doing stuff, but we're not actually technically ourselves creating the code that goes in and updates the database. And that's the beauty of Laravel. Like, it does a lot of things automatically. You just need to know that if you find a particular post inside the database with this particular line of code, then you can then update all the data inside that particular post using this line of code down here, right? So with that, we then want to return to a specific page. Like, we want to redirect the user to a particular URL path, which in this case is just going to be, again, the front page for these particular posts, which is our index page. And we want to do that with a success message, which again is post updated successfully. Now it does give us a error message here because it says, well, what is this ID you're trying to pass inside find or fail? Well, that is actually the ID that we need to pass in inside up here at the top. So we're not trying to pass in like this default text that the resource created for us, but we're just trying to pass in an ID. So this is going to fix that error message. And the last thing we want to do is we want to go down and run a destroy method, which is basically just going to delete our post if we wish to. So I'm going to paste in some code here. And again, in order to delete a post, we need to first of all find the post that we want to delete. And we've done that a couple of times already. So the line of code to do that, which we by now have done a couple of times, is basically just a find or fail method that is built into the base model class that our post class extends to. So find or fail, which points to a particular post with a particular ID, which right now give us a error message because that is actually what we need to pass in up here. Because remember, we need to pass in the data into the method in order to actually use it inside the actual method here. And once we have it, we then simply just run a delete method, which again is just built into Laravel. So we can just call a delete method and it's going to delete that post entry inside our database table. And then we do something we've done many times before. We basically just redirect the user to a particular route, which is called post.index, which is the main post page inside our website, with a success message that says post deleted successfully. So now we have everything we need inside this post controller in order to start actually using these routes inside our views files. Because right now you might be thinking, well, okay, I mean, we have our pages. Like this is, if I go back here, like this is my post page. We'll basically just have a piece of text called all posts, but there are no posts in here. And how do I get to my create a new post page? And how do we delete the post? Like there's no buttons to do that stuff. And that's the next thing we're going to do in the next video, because we're actually going to start building our views files in order to access all these different controllers that we built, or the controller methods that we built in this episode here. So just to quickly recap, because I do think this episode became quite long. Basically, inside the controller class, we have a bunch of methods that are used in order to show the user the main post page, which is the one inside the index method here. Then we have a bunch of methods for guiding the user to the create a new post page, or actually creating a new post inside the database, or for example, finding a particular post that we want to do something with inside the database, or actually updating a post inside the database, or destroying a post inside it. You kind of get what I'm going at here, right? We basically just do all the different things that we want to do to a particular post by using this file here. And I just want to mention, because this is something that people might not realize, like these are just the default resource methods that we created when we ran the resource, like the little R, when we actually created the model and the controller files. You can, if you want to, go below here and create a new public method yourself if you want to. Call it something like whoopsie-doo, just to have something. And then start creating your own custom code. So if you want to do something very particular, maybe you want to find a post and then update it, but then delete another post, well, then you just create this custom method and then you just start coding, just like we did previously. Well, if you want to find a post, you use this line of code here. Well, that means you need to pass something in to the actual method. Well, we're going to pass in this ID so we can actually find the post. And then you need to go down, and then you want to say you want to update something. Well, we have that code up here too. So first of all, you need to grab the new, the new text that we actually passed in, and say that you want to update that particular post that we just found. And then you might go in and say, well, we're also going to go and delete that post. So we have that code right there, and you use that one. So you can kind of like build this like a Lego built project. You have a bunch of commands that you can use, and then you just kind of use them inside your custom-made methods down here. Just to say that you can mess around with this. Like you don't have to, be scared of like going outside these pre-created methods here by using the resource command. Like you can do your own stuff too if you wanted to. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to create views and how to actually create the pages what we're going to use these particular controller methods inside of. So from inside, for example, our index page, we're going to have a button that says create new post. And then it's going to bring the user to a new page where we can create a new post, which, by the way, we created down here called create.blade.php. And how do we do that? Well, we just simply call upon our create method inside the post controller. So when I click that create new post button, then we just basically run this method here, which brings the user to our create page. And once we go inside the create page, we fill in, like the title and the message of that particular post, which is a form that we have inside that particular view file. Then we want to submit it to another particular method we have in here, which in this case is going to be the store method. And that is then going to create our post inside the database and lead the user back to the front page. I hope this makes sense. This is like, I don't know. It can be a little bit overwhelming for new people, especially new people. And I hope that just simply by following these lessons, I know you probably have questions right now, but hopefully just by simply doing it and then following the next lesson, it's going to start to like fall into place and it's going to start making sense. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.